It's recorded now.
Mm-hmm. Hey, y'all. Welcome. My name is Patricia Thomas, and I'm excited about what we're going to share tonight. As I stated in my bio, I've been a realtor for quite a while now, and that journey has led me into several different transactions, of course, real estate related, but it's also helped me to assist numerous families and making their house a home. So this month, of course, in the Teach Me Tribe, we've been focusing on real estate and that real estate being us. What's in our hearts? How do we want to present ourselves? How can we bring our best selves forward? And in that, I wanted to address the place where we live. And of course, that official place is us. We live on the inside of these natural bodies. But in addition to that, these bodies live in a dwelling place. Your home, the house that you purchased, is so vital. It's so important to you and your family being comfortable and being in a place where you can give life, add life to each other, and sustain a good quality of life. So I wanted to kind of share with you guys in that regard tonight from the standpoint of a buyer, a seller, and an investor. And we're going to talk about how each one of these aspects can fear on one kind of build on the other and get us to a point where not only are we in a home that's safe and relatable to our families and our community, but also a place where we can grow, thrive, develop, and build community and ultimately build wealth and legacy. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. So I'm going to share my screen. I keep trying to grab this mouse because it's sitting right next to my laptop, but I've got the scroller one on here. So I'm going to grab it and share my screen. Hey, Tiffany, I thought you were going to keep your video or your photo up too, but hey, that works for me. Let's see.
I don't want you to feel alone.
I appreciate it. I think I can handle it.
Okay.
But I do appreciate it. It makes me feel, it does make me feel a little more comfortable. So we're talking about real estate, and we're just going to keep it simple tonight, guys. I believe in simplicity. You don't have to use, Eric and I were talking about that earlier. We don't need all the fancy words. We just need the understanding of what it is that we need to do in the transaction. And with that, we're going to go ahead to the first slide. Now, again, as I stated earlier, we're going to be navigating the world of real estate, and we're going to look at it from the vantage point of a buyer, a seller, and an investor. Real estate is one of the greatest assets to assist in obtaining and building wealth. However, a real estate transaction can be so much more than just purchasing a house. This transaction can assist with creating a home for you and for your family. Now, as a buyer, that's typically where people start out at when you're getting your first home, when you're considering where you want to be, where you want to live, after you've gone through that rental process. And some people just go straight from parents' house to purchasing a house, for whichever scenario you may be in. Most of the time, you're going to start out as a buyer. Now, when you start out as a buyer, one of the considerations you're going to think about is where do I want to live? Where do I need to be? When you're thinking about that, not only consider where you want to be, but think about a safe place for your family. Think about what's going to best suit the needs of your family, and how can you take that particular property. Don't just think about the now, but how can you take that particular property and help bless your family or put your family in a position where you can gain from it in the future. When you're considering that, definitely buy a house. Now, if you can, I always suggest people to buy a house, even if it's not your dream home. Start where you can afford. Decide what's comfortable for you. Get with the lender, find out what they say you can afford, but don't just base it upon what the lender says. You think about what your comfort level is. And then once you determine that, make sure you do a little due diligence and find out what your credit looks like. Know where you are, know where you stand before you kind of go into that transaction. And then once you do that and you're comfortable with moving forward, you know your whys, where or your W's rather, your where, your what, and what does your credit look like. Then you're ready to go ahead and move forward with purchasing a property. Now, during this buying process, you're going to have a team of people that are going to play a part in that role. You've got your lender. That's where you start out with your qualifying process on step one. You'll get with them, provide your income documentation. They'll pull a credit report. And once they pull their credit report, they'll take also a full application, which will include your work history, any properties that you've rented previously, and any type of debt that you may already have. They'll compare that information that's on that application, which is called the 1003. They'll compare that to what's on your credit report and the income documentation that you turned in. And from that, you'll be able to determine not only do you qualify, but also how much do you qualify for based upon the information that you provided. Now, once you determine that you qualify and you're ready to move forward in that aspect, then you're going to choose me or Brandy, and we're going to be your local realtor. And we'll assist you with finding that property that best suits the needs of you and your family. Again, you're not just thinking about what you can afford, and you don't let that lender tell you what you can afford. The lender may say, well, you can qualify for $400,000 easily. But you know that you and your family like to take weekend trips once a month. You like to do a family vacation for a week every summer, a back to school trip, all of that. So you need to factor in your lifestyle and make sure that the house you're purchasing is what's going to fit and suit the needs of your family, not trying to keep up with Tiffany and her grand house or Shakisha and this big mansion that she has. You figure out what works best for you. If that mansion works best for you, great. But if a standard 3-bedroom, 2-bath works for you, that's fine. If a condo works for you, because at that time you might not even have a family. So you determine what's best for you. You choose your realtor, and then again, that which kind of falls into step 3. When you're locating that property, you're thinking about those things. So once you located that property, another part of your team is going to be your home inspector. After you get your property under contract, the home inspector is going to come through and check all of the major components of the property, and they will give you a detailed list with photos to let you know what's going on with this property. That way you can make an informed buying decision, and you'll know that this property is the best suited property for you. Sometimes there are some properties that may have a substantial amount of work, and you may not want to move forward with that purchase. Or if you do decide to move forward with that purchase, you can use that home inspection as a negotiating tool where you can get the seller to either make those repairs or reduce the price on their property to offset some of those repairs that are needed. Now, once you've gotten that home inspection done and you know you're going to move forward with that purchase transaction, then the appraiser will come in. He's going to assess the value of that property as well as the size of that property. And he will give you a value that will be based on 2 things. Either it will be an as-is appraisal saying the condition of this house right now meets lending requirements and it is worth $300,000 or it's worth $100,000 in its current condition, or he'll give you what's called a subject to appraisal stating this property is okay to move forward, but under these conditions. He may say it's subject to some rotted wood on the exterior being repaired, or the roof appears to be aged. He needs a statement from a licensed contractor saying the roof still has XYZ number of years of life expectancy left, and then he can make that appraisal good to go. Now, once that all of that's been done, you go through your underwriting process with your lender. The final step is going to be your closing attorney, and all of that is a part of your contract process in step 4. You'll go to your closing attorney. You'll bring whatever amounts that are needed for closing, and then at that point you'll close and you get the keys to your house. And you're then a lot of times first time buyers, sometimes second time, third time, however many times. But that's pretty much the gist of the buying process. When you're considering this part, again, I want you to think not only for now, but think about what are the needs of your family. What's going to best suit what you guys need for now, and how can it set you up to be in a great position in the future? Like there are, for example, a property that I bought 3 years ago. I bought it in Byram. It was a distressed property. I bought it as is, and so I did the work as I went along. I knew that this was a good area, and I knew that the price that I purchased the house for was a great price. So that purchase then put me in the position to have a substantial gain to where I could be in a position to have the house that I have now. So as we're talking about the processes and what leads you from one step to the other, I want you to think about that when you're thinking about buying, where you want to buy, why you want to buy, and how is that going to help you and your family for the future. So now we've gone through the buying process, and we move on to the next slide. We're talking about the different loan types. You got FHA, you got VA, USDA, conventional, renovation mortgages, new construction, and what's called portfolio products. Now, the FHA, that's most of the time what a lot of first-time buyers use because the qualifying standards are a little less strenuous than some of the other loan types. FHA does require a 3.5% down payment, but for the most part, if for first timers, especially for those geared with low to moderate income, there are grants and some first time buyer programs available that can assist you with obtaining that property with little to no money down, because you can use those grants towards your down payment, and depending on the amount of the grant, towards your closing costs or some of the closing costs as well. And FHA also allows the seller to assist with up to 6% of the concessions towards that. So a lot of first-time buyers and a lot of people that are in a position where they could purchase a house, but they may not have a lot of cash on hand, that program allows them to get a house with little to no money down. So a lot of people tend to use that one. Now, VA, of course, is one that's geared towards people that have served previously or are still serving in the military. And they have what's called a certificate of eligibility and that they receive. And that program allows you to purchase at 100% down. So you don't have to worry about a down payment at all. In this VA loan type, you also can still receive assistance from the seller for your concessions. So with that, on the VA loan, same thing, you can get into the house for little to no money down. Now, USDA loan, same thing, 100% financing, but USDA is geared toward a certain area. You have to purchase a property that's in what's considered a rural area, and what they have a eligibility map. You will plug in the address, and if that property qualifies for a location or qualifies within that area, then you can obtain a USDA loan and you don't have to pay any money down. And then again, you can get the seller to assist with some of the concessions or closing costs in that, and it's a little to no out-of-pocket expense on that one as well. Now, it used to be on USDA where the area was really limited to the properties that qualify, but they've expanded the maps in some of these really nice neighborhoods now because people are building so many subdivisions on the outskirts now. So a lot of these subdivisions that at one particular time they didn't even have it as a subdivision, but now they're building so many, and some of your nicer homes and some of your nicer subdivisions can qualify for USDA, and you can get in a house where you can afford the payment, but if you're kind of strapped on the cash, you can qualify for no money down. We've got a conventional loan type. Conventional is the one of our oldest loan products. It's 3% down, 5% down, 10% down. Pretty much it's going to be a minimum of 3%, but from there it can go 5, 10, 15, 20, however much you want to pay down, but most of the products have a 3 or 5% down payment required. These renovation mortgages, each one of those loan types that I just discussed, they've now started introducing some products where you can purchase the property and do renovations and incorporate all of that into one loan type. So FHA has what's called a 203B and a 203K. There's a streamlined 203K. That streamlined one is one where the 203B, let's start there. With the 203B, just say like that appraisal we talked about before, if there's really minimal repairs that need to be done, like $5,000 or less, you can do a 203B. Just say maybe it's some rotted wood or something of that sort. You roll those costs into the loan, and you move forward with that particular transaction. Any of these loan products with the renovation mortgages, they do have to be completed by a licensed contractor. The next one for FHA is going to be a 203K streamline. That's going to be one where the repairs are $35,000 or less. And so with that one, what happens is the contractor is given half of that amount up front and then half of that after the work is completed. So if there is, let's say there's $20,000 in repairs that's needed, what'll happen is they will write up a detailed scope of work. They return that in to your lender. And if you're purchasing a property for $100,000, but the property can appraise for $120,000 and it needs that $20,000 in repairs, then you can actually purchase or at least $120,000 on appraisal value. Then you can purchase and renovate that house, have it all in one mortgage. They'll give 10 to the contractor at the time of closing. They'll send out an inspector after the work is completed and all the documentation has been turned in to the lender. And then after that process, they'll give the contractor the other 10. On the one that's the larger one, that doesn't really have a limit as long as the total amount stays within the FHA loan limits and the property can appraise for that amount. So let's say we take that same $100,000 house, but it's in an area that can qualify for $200,000, but the property is in pretty bad shape. It's going to need another $80,000 worth of work. You can take that property, do your renovations, and then be at a $200,000 appraised value or possibly more, depending on the improvements that you made to the house. Like if you made an extra room, added some square footage, or whatever the case may be, the appraiser will do that appraisal subject to what all of the additional repairs would be, and he'll turn that into your lender. Your contractor will write up a detailed scope of work, and with that one, they pay it out in stages. So if it's a $70,000, $80,000 job and the contractor needs material costs or something up front, then they'll do that phase, and then they'll come out and inspect, do the next phase, and then the final phase will be paid out once all the work is 100% completed. And with each one of these loan products now, like I said, they've started doing renovation mortgages because they've noticed that there are so many older homes still on the market, and then there are so many people or so many properties that can really be nice and put people in a great equity position. I myself like to buy them that are when they're kind of distressed or they need some updated, because it just puts money in the bank for me. It not liquid money, but money where I've got equity in a property that I know I can tap into at a later point if I need it. Now, new construction is just what it is. You're building a house from the ground up, and they have some loan products now where you can actually do a construction to permanent. You get a one-time close, and you're locking your rate based upon whatever terms you negotiated with your lender. And you'll take, after the draws and all of the phases of the construction is completed, then you'll roll into a permanent mortgage, and you'll have that permanent mortgage for the life of the loan. Now, with that new construction, any amounts they have different ways. It kind of depends on the lender, which one you're working with. Some of them will have it where you can kind of roll your payments into the loan. And then others, while you're getting the house constructed, depending on the amount that you're borrowing and the after repair value or the after constructed value. Others will set it where you can do an interest only payment, or you just make your payments based upon the draws that you have at that time. So it really just depends on the lender, the loan product, and what you're trying to accomplish, how much you're paying down, what type of assets or skin in the game you have on that. So if you're doing a new construction, you're putting your lot up for collateral, then you may not need any out-of-pocket expense. If you need to purchase a lot and build a house, then of course you're going to need a down payment. On this portfolio product, this is actually going to be products where different lenders that have different in-house products that are geared towards different stuff they want to offer. We have a local bank here called Cadence that has some really good in-house products. And I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't have shouted out a particular name, but we have multiple banks here that have various loan products, from credit unions to some of the standard banks. But that one particular one that I mentioned before, they have some products that are geared toward teachers, doctors, where they assist with closing costs. There may be no down payment. The doctors, they can get a house based upon or obtain a loan based upon what they will make in the future versus while they're still a resident versus what they have right now. They have products where, just like with the typical conventional, you may have 3% down or 5% down, or with FHA, you may have 3.5% down, and you've got a mortgage insurance on all of those products. With some of their in-house products, they have one where there is no mortgage insurance premium, and you can qualify at 100% down. Now that the rate on these portfolio products may be a tad bit higher, maybe a quarter to a 0.5%. But when you consider, like on a standard FHA product, the mortgage insurance, or a conventional one, the mortgage insurance may be an extra 150, depending on the loan amount, $100, $150, $200 a month, or again, just depending on the loan amount. That little bump in the rate can help to offset a higher payment if you're more payment conscious, because the mortgage insurance doesn't do anything for you. What it does is it protects the lender in case you were to default on the loan. So that's a great option to consider when you're talking to, or when you're considering a lender and you're talking to them about the types of options they have. Think about one of their portfolio products. Most good lenders are going to mention it to you anyway, but if they don't, just remember, Pat mentioned something about a portfolio. Let me see if some of these lenders may have something like that, and find out if there's one that can maybe suit what you're needing. Now, most of the time, once you've gotten past that buyer stage, you're not going to stay in that same house forever. That's when you become a seller. That's why I said it kind of moves in stages. If you bought right, and you bought in an area that appreciates, or you bought a property that gave you some equity, then you can sell that property and be in a better position to move to your next home. And maybe you started out with a townhouse or a condo, or maybe you started with a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in a particular area, and you want to move out to the suburbs, or move up to a larger home, or even downsize to a smaller home. But whatever you decide to do, you're usually starting out as a buyer, you're moving on to a seller, and then we're going to talk about in this next slide the selling process. When you decide to sell your house, step one is you're going to be considering, why do you want to sell? What is it that you need to do? Are all the kids gone and now you're needing to downsize? Did you have multiple kids? You started out with one property, your family grew, you maybe started out with just you and your spouse, or you alone, and then you had 2 babies, 3 babies, 4 babies, in my case 5 babies, and you outgrew the house that you were in, so you needed to get something larger. Just determine, why is it that you're wanting to sell? Consider that, and once you consider that, then have some realistic expectations about what it is that you're needing to accomplish from the sale. Why you wanting to sell the house? Find out from in choosing your realtor in step 2 what that house will sell for. Your agent will give you what's called a market analysis. They'll pull some compatible properties, compatible in size, compatible in the area, the location, compatible in the year built, compatible in a lot of the amenities. And they'll tell you, based upon these things and recent sales and active listings, this is what's the best idea, what we recommend that you should list your house for. Now, I said have realistic expectations because sometimes people can get emotionally attached to a property, and the emotions may be valid for you. However, the emotions don't necessarily add any equity or value to the property. So if you raise your children there, and because of all the great times you had, you want to list the property for $60,000, $70,000 more than the appraised value, or the market value based upon what your agent is telling you, then be a little realistic about your expectations, and in looking at what we're telling you, because we're giving you hard facts and hard data showing you, listen, this property here sold for $295, this one sold for $300, and this one sold at $305. So with that, you can price it right there in that 300 to 305, 309 range, based upon your square footage or amenities or whatever the case may be. And I'm just throwing out hypothetical numbers, guys. But with that, be realistic about what you're wanting, why you're wanting it, and then once you decide that and you're moving forward with it, prepare your house to sell it. I've seen so many properties where they're gorgeous. You walk in, everything is in place. They even have candles lit. I've come into properties where they bake cookies. They've decluttered. They have taken a lot of the extra stuff, the extra tubes, the extra little trinkets, all of the closets that were busting out the seams. They, decluttered the closets, and it's it's so easy to show. It actually sells itself almost. But then you walk into other houses, there's stuff everywhere. The paint is peeling, it's dirty. There is dishes in the sink. They have animals in the house. The house smells like a dog or a cat or whatever animal they may have. And with that, and I've actually had buyers walk into a door and walk back out. And the property had a lot of potential, but because it wasn't prepared for sale, they chose to not even want to look at it. And then on the other hand, I've had buyers that come in, and that property may have not even had the same potential as some of those others, but because that seller really put that property in a good position to be able to show it and sell it, they were able to move forward with getting it sold in a timely manner. And then they move forward to that contract and close part. Another thing I want to mention too, I saw that note that reminded me, is be ready for the interruption when you're a seller. You're gonna have people coming through your house. You're gonna have people wanting to look inside your closets. They're gonna look in your pantry. They're gonna look in your storage buildings. So just know, I know we're living in an age now where everybody has cameras, everybody has rings, so they can see what people are doing. You can't be upset about somebody looking inside your closet. You can't be upset about them checking out your house, because that's what they're there to do. They can't make an informed decision. They can't decide whether they really are wanting to move forward buying this house if they can't look at everything. I've had sellers before that will have certain doors locked because they don't want the person to go in there. So you can see bedroom 1, 2, but you can't see 3. And then, because I just don't want anybody going through there. You laughing, Tiffany, but I'm telling you the truth. It's happened. You can see, I had a seller in a really nice subdivision here, and he had a lot of expensive pieces of jewelry. So, but instead of taking that jewelry and putting it in a safe or doing something with it, he kept it stored. He had a bunch of watches and all different kind of bracelets and just all different kind of trinkets. And he had these shelves built in his master closet, and he put a deadbolt lock on the master closet, so you could see all the rest of the house except for the master closet. It was a huge walk-in closet, really nice house, but you could not see it. The buyer still bought that house based upon all of the other recommendations And but one of the contingencies, of course, was for them to see that master closet. So before we closed, they had to be able to see it. And I was like, wow, what if they had gotten in there and said, well, the closet is not large enough, after they had gone through all of that on it. But it's just easier on the front end to have the house prepared for sale, be ready for the interruption, and then be thinking about what you're going to do once you get that property under contract. Because you do have some sellers, they've determined their why they need to sell, but they haven't determined what they're going to do, or they're still looking for something once they get it under contract and get it sold. And then if you got a buyer where they're in a position where they're ready to move into your house as soon as it closes, you got to get out of it. And so I've come across that situation too, where the sellers had nowhere to go, and the buyer was wanting possession at closing, and the seller still had a house full of stuff. So you've got a dilemma there. How do you address that? And most of the time, the buyer will allow the seller an extra day or two, and you to get finish getting their things out. But it's best for the seller to already have all their ducks in a row, have an understanding about what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, have it prepared for sale. It just makes it an easier process for the agent, for the seller, and for the end buyer that's going to come and look at your property and make a buying decision about whether they want to move forward with it or not. Now, once you go through both of these processes as a buyer and as a seller, that these two things and the equity position that you can build and gain from the purchase and sale of a property, that's going to put you in position to move to what I was talking about earlier, is building legacy. Real estate can create transactions and checks from transactions that can be more than a lot of people's salary. I'm talking about an annual salary in one check from a real estate transaction. And this is what we're going to talk about when I said building legacy and creating generational wealth. You want to get to this point. And you can sometimes I've seen people that came in as a buyer and they bought a duplex. And so they actually came in as an investor on the front end because they lived on one side and they rented the other. So they were an investor from the start. But for the most part, usually people go from buyer to seller, or buyer and then investor, or it's somewhere, but it usually starts with the buyer. If you're going to let me change that. When you decide to move into this next phase and become an investor, you need to determine where your niche is going to be. What do you want to do? If you're going to just have rental units, if you're going to have rental units as well as flip, if you want to get into some multifamily, if you want to be maybe get into some go zones and do what's, you may not have the capital to be able to afford to get in on some of these commercial transactions on your own, but you want to get in on it in that way. So just find what your niche is. You got to determine what that is, and then you got to figure out a way to find the deals. Now, once you decide to become an investor, like Brandon and I were talking about earlier, the biggest thing is deciding to start. You got to take the leap. You got to. There are deals out there. There is money to be made. There is wealth out there that can set us up, set our families up, put us in a position where we can create wealth for our children. We can pass on homes. We can pass on property. We can pass on generational wealth from our names to our children's names to their children, and keep that going, because no more land is being made. You can build a house, but it's got to be on some existing land. When God created this heaven and this earth, this is it. What we've got here is what we've got. So I encourage everybody to own some real estate, whether it's you just owning your own piece of property for yourself, which is the first step. And then once you get past that first step, go into the next phases. Sell some of the property that you have, get into the investment process of it. So make that decision that you're going to take that leap. And once you decide, you got to do your due diligence. You got to find out what the market is like in that area. What are houses selling for? What's the rental rates in that area? Is this an up and coming area where I can purchase a property that may in an area that may be on the cusp of making some changes, growing and developing, and I hold on to it for a couple of years, and then it'll be worth substantially more, and then I cash out on it. In the meantime, I can rent it. And that's what I did with my office. Full disclosure, I bought my office back in 2011. When I first purchased it, I knew of upcoming expansion to that area. I didn't know when it was going to come. It's just now getting started in that area. And when I first bought it, I just let it sat there because I really didn't, as a realtor, you can work from anywhere. And I really didn't use it often, and it needed a lot of work. At the time, I was married. I paid $11,000 for the building. In 2013, I started a mortgage company. When I started the mortgage company, we had to have a brick and mortar, or a building to house a mortgage company in, and it had to be a commercial address. Just so turned out, God had placed me to be in a position to where I already had it, and so we just came in there and we did the renovations that we needed to do and got the mortgage company started. So I ran the mortgage company for about 2.5 to 3 years. Ended up letting that go as the expansion increased and they started kind of weeding out the smaller mom and pop mortgage brokers. I let that expansion go and just stuck with the real estate license. But I kept the office. Now that office is worth more than 10 times what I paid for it. The last appraisal in that area, those properties are selling about 145 to 150, and I paid 11 for it. And the area is continuously increasing. And so that's what I say when I talk about real estate, putting you in a position to where it's like money in the bank. Your savings plan, your retirement plan, your 401ks, instead of having it in that, you got it in a piece of property where if need be, you can sell that property or you can pull cash out of it to do something that you need to do. So do your homework. Decide, find the property, decide what area, what do you want it, what your niche is going to be, where you want to be, and what do you want to do with that property in the future. It could be just hold it and rent it while you're holding it. It could be flipping it. You rehab the property, sell it, find another one, do all that over again. Next step, close and repeat. Or it could be getting into some multifamily units, having multiple doors. And but you just find out what works best for you. Everybody doesn't want to be a landlord. Everybody, and then you have other people that want to be landlords, but they don't want to. They don't want to have any rental units. They just want to flip them. So for me, I do more flipping. I am getting into the rental portion of it now because I realize in order to build long-term wealth and in order to get to where I want to be, which is on some exotic beach somewhere, sipping a cocktail and letting my money work for me, then I know I've got to have more rental units. So I'm actually moving to that phase now to where I'm acquiring more rental units and moving to the phase where I'm actually looking at some commercial things too, and having some multifamilies with multiple doors on it. So, but you start where you are, figure out what works. But it could even be the house that you had previously. Instead of you selling it, you can keep it. You can retain it as a rental, and then you can move on to your next property, have your rental house, and have that house. And you can do that same thing as you're moving forward. You just, like I said, close and repeat. But the repeat can be different depending on your situation. It could maybe be sell and repeat it. It could be keep the house, pull equity from it, and repeat that same thing. But you determine what's best for you. And then lastly, you got to have a great team. You got to put a team together. There is no way that you're going to be able to move and maneuver in that investment world without having a team. And your team is going to consist of your realtor. They're going to help you find your properties. It would be a great idea to have a contact at the courthouse because they find out a lot of things about sales and foreclosures. You also need a great rehab team. Once you find these properties, then you got to be able to be in position to get them fixed up. Whether you're going to retain it as a rental or whether you're going to flip it, you got to have a good rehab team I've got a go-to electrician. I've been through some carpenters, but I've got a really good go-to, two or three of them. Electrician, I've got a great granite guy, I've got a great plumber, I've got a great HVAC guys. Whenever I need, I just call them. Tim, I need this. Mr. Phillips, I need that. I got ABCD, and those are my guys, and I already know whenever I line up a job, I'm looking at my scope of work and I know I can call Tim for this, Philip for that, this Mr. White for this. I can call Steve for this. I've got it done. That's my team. And I don't even consider a property if I know I can't get the rehab done on it. I've got one that I'm looking at right now. I'm sure you guys heard about the recent storms that we had, and the tree fell through the house. And the people are going to cash out on their insurance policy, so they're not wanting to keep the house. They're just wanting to, get their insurance and then just sell the house for whatever they can get on it. That's going to be a major undertaking because it literally split the house in two. So it's almost like half of the house has to be torn down and rebuilt. So I'm putting my numbers together to make sure that it's going to work for me, which is another thing you definitely want to do. You don't ever just see a house or see a situation and don't do your due diligence. That goes back to your doing your homework. But I want to make sure you understand, don't purchase a property without doing your homework. You got to do your due diligence. You may see something, and I'm going to use $100,000 because it's a simple number. You may see something and it may have an after repair value of 100,000, and you can get it for $50,000, but that property may need $40,000 in repairs. You things that you can see and things that you can't see. And if you're going to spend $40,000 in repairs, and then you got to turn around, relist the property, pay the costs associated with the listing, plus the holding costs with carrying the property while you're renovating it, where's the profit? You've got to consider all of those things while you're thinking about getting your properties. Hey, Eric. So I want to make sure that you guys understand all of that and be aware of how investing, how real estate can really put us in a position where we're getting to a place where this house can be at home with what we're wanting to do and how we're wanting to build legacy for our family. This process of buying and selling real estate is so much more than just buying a piece of land or buying a building. That's what it's about. It's about creating a home for others, establishing our communities, generating wealth, and building legacy. That's my desire. When my kids started, my kids are in their, well, I have one daughter in her 30s, but she's owned her house now for 10 years. My son just bought his first home. My other two girls, they're in townhouses. I want them to get started early. I actually want them to hang on to those units and keep them so that they can have rental property and generating income that'll pay for their next property. When you're considering moving through these different phases from a buyer to a seller to an investor, use what you've got. Use the home that you've got now. There are ways that you can actually tap into this investment arena, and you don't have to have a boatload of money. You just got to have the want to. You got to have the desire. You got to do your homework. You got to be diligent about what you want to do. You got to be diligent about securing a position for yourself, for your family, and creating what we're talking about, this legacy that you want to establish for not just you, but you can bring others in this thing too. You can create a network and an investment circle. Bring your siblings, put your kids in there. I have a client, she and her son and her cousin, they've actually started an investment group together. They pooled their money together, and they're buying their first house together. So you can do it that way. You can look at pooling resources. You can look at the house that you have currently. Get a home equity line of credit. I prefer doing it that way versus actually refinancing your house, because the home equity line is essentially just a credit card on your house. So if you're going to flip a property and you have, just say you have $100,000 of equity in your property, and you can grab a property that's 40, 50,000 and put another 20 into it, you can tap into your home's equity, get that line of credit, flip that house, and then pay the line off. You profited 20,000 after. So if you're all in for 70, you got 10,000 or so associated with the cost to sell it. Then you got $20,000 that you profited, plus you paid off the line of credit. Go find another one and do that again. Go find another one and do that again. And you can go from buying a house that's at a price point of 50 or 60,000 to get into some that are 2 or 300,000 to get into some that are 4 and 500,000. Because sometimes you run into builders or you run into people in these high-end neighborhoods that don't have either, they run out of resources, somebody got ill. I mean, there's all types of reasons and circumstances as to why people can't finish a project or they lost their property. There's a really prominent neighborhood here. I was able to pick up a property for $375, and that neighborhood, that property in that subdivision valued at almost $600,000. So there was a large spread in there. There was about $100,000 repairs that was needed, but still all in with the closing costs, the holding costs, the repairs. You're in it for 500, right at about 500, but it appraised at 600. So there's still a nice spread there. Do it, guys. Start where you are, learn where you are, find you a competent team where you can get all your questions answered, and don't be afraid to ask questions. We're destroyed for the lack of knowledge, not for asking the question. I don't know everything. I don't proclaim to know everything. And I'll tell you quickly, if I don't know, I'll go find the resources and find out. I ask questions all the time. I want to know. I research things on my own. I ask people that know more than me. I Google, I search, I get out there and ride. I look, I learn neighborhoods. I've been in Birmingham riding y'all streets, learning the neighborhoods there because I want to know if I'm going to invest anything in a particular area. I want to know what that area is like. And Brandy, I like to talk to you about some maybe some possible things at a point because I am considering doing some things in that area. So I'll reach out to you. But don't be afraid to get started. Don't be afraid. Start wherever you are. If you just being a first time buyer, look at your credit. Don't be afraid to look at it. Don't be afraid to find out what you can afford, but get started. Go from there to selling your house, to repeating that, to investing, to getting to a point where you can own apartment complexes, set your kids up, and build legacy for the future. Now, I hope that I've said something tonight that has helped you guys understand this buying process a little more. I do see we've got some things, some comments in the chat. So Tiffany's asking, how is the investment market right now with the interest rate being so high? Is it a good time to invest? Absolutely. What I say, Tiffany, is that you're not married to the rate. What you want to do is acquire the property. The rates are subject to change, or you can get yourself in a position where if you get multiple units, depending on what you're trying to do, you could possibly pay that property off. I've had a property at one particular time where I did, because I will use a hard money loan. Most of the loans I use are private lending or hard money loans, and I'm in and out of them because I'm flipping them. But if I decide to keep it and I borrow money against it, what I'll do is I know that interest rate is high, but I'm not looking at it for long term. I'm looking at this is what I need to do to lock down this property for right now. And if I've got some deals where I'm flipping and I can make, just say I can make 40,000 off a flip, I borrow 40,000 to get this particular house. I can flip two houses. If I don't want to use all the money from the flip, I can take the chunk of 20 and put it towards that. The next time I flip another one, I put that other 20 towards that. If I do 2 or 3 in a year, the money that I had, that high interest rate loan, I paid it back off in less than a year. And at the same time, somebody else has been making the payment, because if you're going to retain it as a rental, you're not paying it. Rental rates are always higher than what they're higher than what we would have as a mortgage loan. So if I have a property where I may be paying $1,000 on a mortgage on it, I more than likely will be able to rent that property for $1,500, $1,600 a month. So you got your spread, and usually when you have your mortgage payment, you're going to have that payment all inclusive, what we call PITI. Your principal, your interest, your taxes, and insurance will normally always be wrapped in that one payment. So if you got 1,000, you're paying, the other person pays the 1,500. It's good. So don't get caught up in that rate. You think about long term. What are you looking at trying to accomplish with that particular property? Not necessarily what the rate is, because you can always refinance the property. Number one. Number two, somebody else is going to be paying it anyway, and then you can do some other things to help you pay it off soon, so you don't have to pay that rate for 20 years, 30 years. So that's how I look at it. If I was afraid of an interest rate, I wouldn't buy anything, because most of my stuff it comes from hard money, because I like to move quickly. If I see something, especially if the seller is wanting to get it from under them right away, traditional financing is not the option. They're looking for somebody who can just do title work and close. And so I have actually worked with a multimillionaire, and he lends his money out, and that's his area of real estate, how he makes money. And so with that, we're able to close them quickly. We can close in 3 to 5 days. Just quickly we can get the title work back. But there is a cost for doing that quickly. And with that, I'm not concerned about it. I just do the numbers. I do my homework. If it works for me, then how much he makes, that's not my concern. I'm happy that he's making money. In reference to the tax on the properties, if you're going to, it's different depending on whether you're going to flip it or whether you're going to hold it as a rental. If you're going to hold it as a rental property, then once you get past that first year, you can start writing off a ton of depreciation on the property. You can count your rents. You can actually show a loss, even though you're making money every month. You can actually, tax wise, and you can write up all of the your mortgage that you have on it. You can write the taxes that you're paying on it. You can look at the property depreciation. You can look at any repairs or renovations you have to do on the property, and you can actually write all of that stuff off on your taxes. And that's another reason why we need to own real estate, because real estate, especially for those people that are making more, you need to have some type of shelter to be able to offset some of that income that you have coming in. So in real estate, if you're purchasing rental property and you're maintaining that property, if you got land that you maintain, there's an investor I follow, and he talked about he had to buy real estate just to help him prevent paying so much doggone money on his tax liability, because he could shelter it there. And then the HELOC that I was talking about earlier, if you borrow money from a property, borrow money is just what it is, borrow money. You could use that property or that money to buy another property, or you can use it for whatever purpose it is, but because it's borrowed, it's not a gain. So you don't pay taxes on it. So you can actually borrow money from yourself or from a property that you own, and then use it to acquire another property. And you could also do what's called a 1031 exchange. Anytime you purchase a property, it doesn't have to be exactly like the property that you bought previously. But if you purchase and invest for the purpose of investing, and you purchase another one within that window of time, I believe it's 6 months. I'll need to verify that, but I'm almost certain it's 6 months. As long as you are reinvesting that money back into the next property, then you don't pay any gains on that either. So there are ways that you can offset the taxes on it, where you can actually live off some of the money and still be in an okay position tax wise. Now, for me, I kind of play multiple roles in the transactions. Like some of them, I might be a realtor and I represent myself in the transaction, so I can get a commission off of it. But then the monies that I'm utilizing for, or that I'm making off of it, even when I sell a property, when I flip it, I'll pay myself a commission, because when I pay the commission, then I can also offset the expenses of my brokerage. The office expenses, the money I have to pay the agent, all that kind of stuff. I'm wrapping all that and absorb it up into that. So there are different ways that you can do it. So if you flip the house and you assisted with some of the repairs, or you paid yourself for doing that, then you have another way that you can kind of make some money off of that sale without having to put 100% back into it, and then get some money that way. Just say maybe you want to have 10,000 of it without it going to having to go right back into the next property. You can actually create a line item on your settlement statement, maybe as a second mortgage or debt, or and I've done that too, where I've actually put in or written in the repair list, made pay, and sent the contract, not the contractor, but the attorney's office, an invoice for my construction company. If I wanted to get 10,000 from the sale, then I would put one call construction on there, send my invoice in for whatever repairs I did. I'd get a 3% commission as a realtor. So that's giving me, if it's, again, 100,000 is just a simple number. So if I did $100,000 sale, I take 3,000 commission, and then I take 10,000 as a contract. Then I've made 13. It decreased the tax liability on that particular property. The other 30,000, that instead of it being 40, 45 or so, it comes down to 30 after I subtract those things out. And I can take that money and roll it into the next transaction as a 1031 like exchange. So, and then I take the money from the other ways that I divided it out. I showed that I had to pay Pedro this amount, I had to pay that. So it's ways to do it where you can offset a lot of that tax liability on it. Now, I am not the tax expert, but it would be a great idea to have an individual on your team for that. That would be one of our team players, but you can do it. You can, in reference to sheltering those funds or sheltering some of that, offsetting some of that tax expense, and investing. Now, I see another one. You said, can I buy a house and put it in one of my children's names? I've done that multiple times. With some of these lenders, not lenders necessarily, but some of these entities, like HUD, for example. HUD requires a lot of banks and a lot of entities like HUD, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. They will gear their properties to owner occupants first before it's open to investors. So there's a property here right now that has a good list price on it, but it has a 10-day window where you can only purchase it as an owner occupant. Once it gets past that window, if nobody buys it during that period, then it's open to investors to bid on it. By that time, the property may be already gone. I said I have 5 kids. I've used 3 of them already to purchase their homes. Now, they only own those homes, for a year. They owned it long enough to be legit. With FHA, you have to have owned the property for 1 year, and owner occupied it for 1 year in order to not commit fraud. My daughter was living with me. She was of age to purchase a property. I think she was 18, 19, whatever the case was at the time. She was of age to purchase the property, and so I bought it in her name, and we we kept it like that, and I just left it like that essentially until I was ready to sell it. And I had a quick claim deed already prepared just in case, God forbid, something happened to my daughter. We didn't have to worry about the property being in probate or whatever. All I had to do was go file the deed because it was already prepared. But yeah, to answer your question, you can do that. My office that I was telling you about earlier, that property was bought in one of my kids' names because it's in a district or in an area where it's called overlay, where you can work and live in it at the same time. And she had become of age, and it was only open to owner occupants. So I bought the property. We were living somewhere else with that one, so I had to turn the utilities on in her name and leave them there for a year, and nobody occupied it for that first year. It just sat until we were ready to establish the mortgage company. But by the time we were ready to do what we needed to do, we were legally in a position to where we did it without it being an issue for me or for her or for anybody. And I see, how can buying a house help you with buying a house in the future? Just like what we were just talking about, if you buy a property in an area and you buy it with equity, or if the property or value increases in those areas because of some change in the market or whatever the case may be, then if you buy that house at $100,000, keep in mind you're paying it down every month when you're sending in your payment. A portion of that payment is going to go to principal, and then the rest will be your interest. But those first few years, a lot of it is interest. But once you're doing that, you're paying it down, and then it's increasing in value. And that's the great thing about real estate. Also, yeah, if you don't know by now, you should know. I love real estate, and I encourage everybody to own a piece of it. So, unlike cars, you buy a car, drive it off the lot, it depreciates immediately. With a house, as long as you buy right, do your homework on the front end, decide where you want to stay, buy an area that's going to appreciate in value or that's going to hold its value. While you're paying it down, more than likely that house is going to go up in value. And when it does, if you bought that house at 100,000, you lived in it for X number of years, now your payoff is 85. And when you get ready to sell it, the house appraises for 140. That's how you make money, and that's how you gain money to move to the next step. And then so next time you're ready to buy a house that's 200,000, and you got your down payment, you can put X amount of dollars into that for your down payment, and you can do like what I do. I find a property, and that's not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. We're all different, but for me, I like to find properties that are in really nice areas, but they need a little work. That way I can come in with some instant equity. I don't have to have the newest thing on the block, not when I'm getting it, because I want to be able to negotiate the price and negotiate it down. And and then once I get it, I'm going to come in and put my touch on it. And everybody around me paid, substantially more than what I paid for my house, but my house looks just as nice, if not better, than the ones around me, and I paid substantially less for it. So I'm in a much better equity position. And that's the way it is with the house that I'm in now. I'm actually living in one of my investment properties. I purchased it, and there was something that the city was supposed to do with a drain line in the yard, and it created a hole, and they have not completed the repair. And so I can't sell it with a big hole on the side of the house. So I had completely gutted it and redid everything. I'm in a position where my house is the freshest, nicest looking house on the street, and I have no mortgage on it. And all the people around me well, I don't know their personal business, but they probably do have mortgages, and or whatever they may be. But my house holds just as much value because there's another investor that has flipped a couple of them in here, and just looking at the comps, it's it's money in the bank, and money that I can pull from and do what I need to do, buy other properties, do this, just flip it and do it all over again. Let me see if we got some more. If you have any, okay, that's you. Can you buy a house? Oh, absolutely, you can buy a house without a realtor. Now, of course, I'm an advocate for using a realtor, but you don't have to. If you like I was talking about earlier with having a good contact at the courthouse, you maybe know someone there and you know a property that's about to come up at auction. You can go to the auction at the courthouse steps yourself. Now, I wouldn't recommend a courthouse sale for a novice unless you just want to jump on in there, get beyond the shallow water and jump on in the deep. Because a lot of the time you cannot see those properties. They're sight unseen. You can find some great deals on the courthouse steps, but they usually are sight unseen. And sometimes the owners may still be in the house. So not only are you not able to see what they look like, but you got to deal with getting the owner out too. So that's not really something I recommend. But to answer your question, you definitely can buy a property without an agent. There are a lot of properties that are for sale by owner. There are a lot of times where you may see a property that looks like it may be abandoned. You can jot down that address as you're driving by the property. It's like, that grass is high. I wonder, does anybody live there? And you can call the utility company. Act as if you may be considering purchasing the property and you want to turn the utilities on for an inspection. They will say, well, it's already on in Joe Smo's name. So or if they say, okay, well, when would you like to have them turned on? There's nothing on there. And that'll let you, because 9 times out of 10, nobody's going to live in a house where there's no lights, no water, not long term anyway. So if you see the grass is grown high, there's no utilities on, more than likely nobody's living there. You find that address, determine nobody's living there, go to the courthouse, see what you can find out about it. Maybe who owned the property previously, pull, because it's public record, their deed of trust. You can pull their deed of trust and see if the find out the lender that they owe the money to. Not only will they have the lender, but most times it'll have that lender's phone number on there. Call that lender. Not to say 9 times out of 10, they're going to have a real estate owned department or foreclosure department. They're not going to tell you anything specific about that person's loan because it's private information. But a lot of lenders do have links or sites where they will advertise their properties that they foreclosed on. And even if they haven't gotten to that part yet, if it's gotten far enough to where they've assigned it to an attorney, then they're going to have what's called a substitute trustee. When you get that substitute trustee in place, that's going to be recorded at the courthouse as well too. So if it's attorney Joe Black, then you'll see that attorney Joe Black has been assigned to this property at 123 ABC Street, and you'll get attorneys Joe Black address and phone number off that substitute trustee information, and you can contact them directly and let them know. Now they will talk. If you're savvy enough, you can talk to them, and they a lot of times will tell you the date of the sale. Sometimes you can try and negotiate a sale prior to, as long as, especially if the lender has already determined what's called a reserve amount, and that means the minimum amount they'll take at a courthouse for a foreclosure sale. So if they say it's got to hit this $50,000 reserve amount mark, and you come in and say, well, I'll offer you $50,005. And they may decide they want to go ahead and get it off the books. Sometimes they want to wait until the sale, but other times they may decide to go ahead. There was a lady, and this has been years back, but I had a contact at a local bank here, and I would call her on some of the properties that were coming up on the courthouse sale. And even sometimes when it went to the courthouse sale and it didn't sell, and I would do a backtrack and go back and call her and see if I could go ahead and pick those properties up from her. So, yep, you can get it without a realtor. You just gotta do that homework. And there are different ways. That's one of the main ways you can find some of your best deals, though. Getting out there and riding, finding out about properties that are that maybe look a little distressed, look like they're unkept. Check your paper and look at, find out about foreclosure dates. Usually when you go to a foreclosure, though, a sale, you're going to need to have the cash on hand. If you've got equity in your property, that's a good option. You go ahead and set that line of equity up so that when you get it set up, once you're ready to make that sale, if you know you're going to go to the courthouse next Tuesday and you got a line of credit for $100,000, I'm gonna stick with that number tonight. You got a line of credit for $100,000. You have already determined in your mind, I'm not going past $70,000 for the sale of this house. You need to bring the cash with you, so you'll go get cashier's checks for that $70,000 amount. If you can get it, great. Congratulations. If you can't get it, you just take the money and put it back on your line of credit. But so you can do that. There are some lenders and different divisions where they'll do online auctions. If they have that option, then you have a little time. You don't necessarily have to pay it at the courthouse steps. You can go in, make the bid online, and with some of those online auctions, you can bid on those without an agent as well too. You might as well use one, though, because a lot of them, they'll pay the agent and it doesn't interfere with your cost. So why not let somebody have the commission on those if it's available? But for if you decide to bid on one of those, you usually can have anywhere between 20 to 40 days to close out on them. And they'll ask you whether it's cash only, whether it's going to be a financing option, or whatever the case may be. They will not most of the time do a traditional bank financing, but they will consider a private lender, a hard money loan, or something of that sort. and they know, you got to do the title work and all those things associated with it. So if you did one of those, then it gives you an opportunity to go and do what I do, go to somebody like me, or not necessarily me, but the company I work with, and find some private money to get it, to go ahead and acquire the property. So there's tons of ways you can do it. The decision is getting started. I was talking with Eric earlier about, he was asking me, was it really true that you can purchase a property with no money down? And that for certain is true. And as I was telling Eric, though, you're not essentially purchasing well, you can purchase a property with no money down, but we were talking about investments, and we were talking about acquiring an investment without having to, do a traditional down payment. And I was explaining to him about, just putting yourself in a position to make the connect, or make the transaction, set yourself up in the contract process. And once you do that, you will acquire that contract on this property that may be, $50,000. It needs very minimal work, $10,000 in work, and then you come sell it to me. You just want a quick $5,000 off of it. So all you did was, you were riding around, you found a house, and then you called me on it. You may have not been in a position to do it, but the person, you got it locked down for me. So the contract is between Mr. and Mrs. Stellar on ABC Street and Tiffany Newton. And Tiffany Newton has it under contract with them for 50. Tiffany's in turn going to contract with me for 55. So the seller gets their 50, you get 5. I put the $10,000 in renovations in it, and then I go on and flip the property, or whatever I'm going to do with it. And you make a quick 5,000, and you can do that. Go find another one. Like I know some private, some wholesalers here, they're doing that weekly. I know one lady here, her name is Monique. She does those types of deals. She's doing 4, 5, 6 of them a month, and most of the time she wants to make at least 7,000 off each one. Sometimes she'll take less than that. She may, do 3 or 4, but her average is going to be 5 to 6 off each one. And she's doing about 3 or 4 months when she's finding the deals, and she's not having to spend a dime. She's just doing this. She's talking, structuring the deals, putting it together, and then somebody else is coming along and finishing it off, and she's just that middle person. So it's all kinds of ways. I set this up for 8:30, guys. I see it's 8:29. It has been such a pleasure. I hope you guys gained something from all this information that we talked about tonight. And I hope you understand that regardless of all of this and the wealth building opportunity, the main thing about this is not the money. It's about what we're doing to build legacy. It's about what we're doing to create a home and a place, a haven for our families, where not only are we not only are we blessed, but we can be in a position to be a blessing. Y'all have a good evening. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.